Blog Talk Radio.
Greetings and salutations unto the true you within you. Thank you for tuning in to this hemp episode of HempAware Radio. This is your hemp-entrepreneurial host, Tyler Hemp, and I am beyond delighted to share with you the knowledge, wisdom, and insight of hemp and cannabis author, museum curator, consultant, public speaker, cannabis expert witness, and internationally respected authority on industrial hemp, medical cannabis, cultivation, garden yields, processing dosages, commercial intent, personal use, and cannabis culture. I first met Chris Conrad in 2005 in San Francisco at the Hemp Industries Association conference, and this is a gentleman that I have modeled myself after. They always say, or at least one of the sayings that I live by is, listen to people who have what you want. And this gentleman, through reading his books, meeting with him personally, one of his books, Hemp Lifeline to the Future, and then also Hemp for Health, which you can find at HempAware.com/books. Chris Conrad exudes such a professional and sophisticated energy. Check him out on YouTube if you haven't already. What an awesome guy. Thank you so much for being on today's show, Chris. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's great to be here, Tyler. It's nice to be connected with somebody who has, spent so many years dedicated to this issue because, as you know, people come and go, but there's a core group that seems to really stick around for the decades, and you're one of those people. Like, this is 10 years at least? Yeah,
I was first introduced to hemp when I was 17, so that was a little over 14 years ago. But I met you about 10 years, and they say follow your passion, do what you love. And the moment that I was introduced to hemp, I knew I was here to empower and educate as many people as possible. So that's why I love teaming up with people like yourself. And if you're a veteran of cannabis and just coming on board this hemp train, I assure you this show is going to be insightful and intriguing. And today's show is actually called Newbies Guide to Cannabis and the Industry with Chris Conrad. Your new book, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's going to be out very shortly.
Awesome.
Plenty of time for Christmas.
I'm going to be one of your first buys. Oh, very good. Well, I'll definitely be getting a few copies.
Well, I think it's
devour
really important right now, Tyler, because, as we're seeing this, the marijuana legalization surging in the polls in these different states doing things, that there's going to be a lot of people who get involved with this who really, they're in a position where they can really screw things up or they can get it right. So, our book is trying to help them get things right. So I really hope people do, take advantage of this opportunity to gain from my 25, 28, 30 years, however many years this has been going on of research project.
Very good. Well, we need information like that and books like that to really keep us on track. And before we get into the meat of today's show, you can discover more about Chris and his works at chrisconrad.com. And Chris is also the creator of BAC, which is short for Business Alliance for Commerce in Hemp. I would love to discuss what that is. And obviously, it has to do with commerce and it has to do with hemp. So, Chris, let's talk a little bit about your background. What led you up to getting into the cannabis and hemp world? What's your background and what initially inspired you to devour this world and really get so deeply involved with it?
Well, I'm a child of the 60s. I was involved with the civil rights movement. My first political activism was opposing the Ku Klux Klan in Maryland, which is not a deep South state, but we certainly had our problems with the racism and so forth there. So, I felt right away, you may have heard the story of 4 civil rights workers who were buried in a dam in Mississippi because they were trying to end segregation. Well, that's the story that made me decide I had to do something. So I formed a group against the Ku Klux Klan. Later on, I got involved with other civil rights activities. Then we got into the peace movement. And then throughout the 70s, I was involved with an organization in Long Beach, California, where we were working on housing issues, anti-nuclear issues, pro-environment, social justice, things like that. So the idea of political activism has been very just a part of my core. I feel like as an American citizen, if I'm going to live in this country, I have to make sure that I make it a better country because, because that's the way America works. It's the people who make it better. And so it wasn't until 1988 that the turnaround moment in my life happened that made me go from all the different issues I was working on to the hemp issue. And what that was is that I had a niece who went to, well, two things happened. First off, I was involved in an election with a political organization, and the members told me, well, I said, why don't we do something about legalizing marijuana? And everyone told me, impossible. What will happen is that you will destroy your reputation and marijuana will be illegal and your life will be ruined, blah, blah, blah. And I told them I didn't think that. I believe that America is a country where you can make changes if you really believe and work hard enough. And then the next thing was that but I don't know if I really had done anything except for my niece came back from a DARE class and started telling me the lies that they were teaching to her in school, and that infuriated me. And I set her straight about cannabis being one of the safest therapeutically active substances known to mankind and a major industrial source throughout history. And so then she says, well, if marijuana is not so bad after all, then why did they make it illegal in the first place? And my initial impression was I would just tell her what I thought, but then I decided what I really wanted to do is find out, because there's got to be more to it than I know. And so the first thing I did is I went back and I read the congressional hearings, and I found out that right there we have the American Medical Association saying, well, this isn't marijuana, this is cannabis, and people call it hemp, and why are you using a fake word to make it illegal? And then I read all the plastic industry, the textile industry, the seed oil industry, the bird feed industry, all these people saying, hey, wait, we need this plant, you can't get rid of it. And so that woke me up, and so the first thing I decided to do was to take away the word marijuana and replace it with the word hemp, just as the word hemp had been replaced by the word marijuana in the 1930s. And so this is what was really the turnaround was, like I said, that challenged them. They told me I couldn't change it. And then when I found out how much I had been lied to throughout my entire life, because I had a college degree and everything, I had never heard a single word about how important hemp was in the world economy, that America would not have been discovered, so to speak, Europeans without hemp, that it was the original transferable paper and so forth were all made out of hemp, the textiles, the ropes, all these things that made the great civilizations rise were all connected to this plant. And I felt like I had been ripped off of my education. They left out how the world's economy works, and they gave me this thing that was completely wrong. And so I felt I needed to make sure other people learned the truth. I was not going to let those lies continue.
That's awesome. So that's when you eventually created BAC, or Business Alliance for Commerce and Hemp, which a close colleague of mine and dear friend Lawrence Serban with Hemp Traders, he came to work for you before he created Hemp Traders and for Larry. But I would love
he's like one of the greats, I think. He's another example of somebody who got in early, understood it, and made a business out of it that's actually sustainable business. Because I've seen so many people fail in their business enterprises that he's a great model of someone who did it right.
Exactly. And so this idea of commerce and building an alliance for businesses to bring hemp to the market to profit, is that really the intention behind BAC?
Absolutely. What happened is I came into this, it was in 1988. We were at the height of the Reagan administration, at the end of the Reagan administration, I should say. In fact, George Bush had just gotten elected president on the day that I decided to become involved in this issue. That's part of the inspiration for me to decide to do something. What I did was unlike most people who approach this issue, I looked at it and I said, I want to change this. How am I going to change it? And so I decided on several principles. I had to change the way people think, and the way to change the way they think is to change the way they talk, and the way to change the way they talk is to restore the word hemp back into it. And the other thing is to find out what motivates each individual to become involved, because I don't look at society as a big gray lump. It's comprised of the fibers, it's like a tapestry with millions of little fibers in there, and each of them has its own motive for why it's weaving through it, the tapestry, and what it's going to make the tapestry depict, as it were, when all is said and done. So basically, I was looking for ways to reach people, and I thought, well, the one thing that we all have in common as motivation is that we need to make money. And so the idea that people could not only be involved in a social justice issue, but do it in a way where they can actually create economic opportunities for themselves is something that I felt was really important. And I knew a lot of people who were selling marijuana illicitly at the time, but of course what I discovered was that hemp is so much more important economically than marijuana that, that this became a part of my mission was to to reawaken the hemp industry, but also to let people understand that you can make money selling marijuana without having to do it in an illegal sense. We just have to change the laws to make that possible. And so, as I look at what's happened since then, of course, we got the Hemp Industries Association going, and those were businesses. They were into it for the money, but as well as for the social justice. But a lot of it was about making money. When the medical marijuana issue came to the front, we got it started with people who were interested in helping sick people, but before long, people have gotten involved because they see it as an opportunity, like anything in the medical industry, as an opportunity to make money. And then now that we've gotten this momentum for the legalization of marijuana, I think that one of the major turning points was I formed another group called Tax and Regulate, legalize tax and regulate. Legalize tax and regulate. And we didn't say what we were talking about, legalizing, taxing, and regulating. But the whole notion of that was to get people to understand that that how much money there is. It's a $1 billion industry, and I know a lot of people say out here in California that it's kind of a mom and pop industry, and we have people saying, well, they don't like the big money getting into it. But I'll tell you, those international drug cartels you're hearing about, that's big money. There's always been big money in marijuana. Mm-hmm. Is that we've just made it illegal for people to pay their taxes and to record their profits and to give back to society. And that's what we're trying to make legal again, the right of those people who are making the money to contribute back to society without fear of going to prison.
Wow, that is so fascinating. And before we get into the Newbies Guide to Cannabis and the industry, your greatest influences, not only in hemp industry, but just in life in general? Who are some of your greatest influences?
Well, of course, I was majorly inspired by the greats like, John and Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King. And one of the things I noticed is that all three of them got killed. And so I thought, well, what I wanted to do was come up with a way of doing stuff that did not get me killed. I thought I could do more if I was still alive. And so I came up with what I call the gray, meaning that I can instigate and guide change, but then other people tend to get the credit for it. And so that's why a lot of your listeners have probably never heard of me, even though I've been possibly the most, but certainly one of the most influential people in this industry, is because I am normally busy getting other people the credit for things, and then I could continue on moving forward in my own direction. But one of the people that I always have to mention is Sid Solomon. Nobody's ever heard of him. He was just a guy who taught me how to be a political activist and how to succeed at being a political activist. Because a lot of people, they get into it, they like the political fight, but to me, it's not about fighting; it's about winning. And Sid Solomon was the person who taught me how to win politically. But then within the cannabis industry, of course, you've got Jack Herer, of course. I worked with him and designed and edited The Emperor, where close. I collaborated, did a lot of the actual ghostwriting on that book in 1990. And so, Jack and I, we had our differences, but we had the similar vision of hemp being used to save the earth. And so, that's where we had this kindred spirit. And for a long time, we were side by side until we got to Prop 215. At that point, he felt we should keep demanding all. And I said, it's time to take legal medical marijuana if we can get it. I don't want to keep, I'm not an all or nothing person. And Jack was. He was inspirational in a certain way, but I also learned from his shortcomings. Somebody else that's really important to me is Ben Dronkers, the Sensi Seed Bank owner and the owner of the Hash Marijuana Hemp Museum. When I went to Holland, and I connected with him and his son Alan, and we put together the museum. I said, this is an opportunity to inform the whole world about this stuff, not just America, which The Emperor was really designed for America. And so I got to move from probably the most influential book in America and organizing 90-some organizations here in the U.S., and then I went to Europe, and we spread that. We got all my information that I wrote for not only for BAC, but the Family Council on Drug Awareness. People may have heard of that. It's something, 10 things every parent, teacher, and teenager should know about marijuana and Bible, those kind of things. That we, I published all these different things for the U.S., but then we went to Europe and we translated into like 7 or 8 different languages and got spread all around the world. And so that made a huge jump forward. And Gatewood Galbraith, he was the Kentucky gubernatorial candidate. You just got to be inspired by the guy. He's saying, my pappy grew hemp and I should be able to grow it too. Of course, he's passed away now, as has Jack, but Ben is still alive. So, another guy who I think is often doesn't get enough credit is Don Wertschafter. Don Wertschafter he had the Ohio Hempery and the Hempery, and now collecting a lot of things. A lot of people don't realize how important he has been. But, I've worked side by side with him for many, many years, and I find him to be great. And, of course, the other thing is everybody in the Hemp Industries Association, National Cannabis Industries Association. I was directly involved in forming the Hemp Industries Association, the first president. The National Cannabis Industries Association, Aaron Smith was he was an assistant of mine, and then he went on to do this, like Don Duncan, assistant of mine, who went on to become the one of the founders of ASA, and he's done a huge amount of California and so forth. So, I'm really inspired by the people I meet, and then they go on and they do more. I think that's the most exciting. The members of the HIA being one of the core groups of that.
Most certainly, I vouch for every human that you just discussed or mentioned. Absolutely. So
yeah, well, there's so many,
in the industry.
Yeah, and one becomes it's almost scary to mention anybody because you have to exclude so many other people just by doing that. And there's just I'm inspired every day by people.
Mm-hmm. Amen. Me too. Well said. With regard to the Newbies Guide to Cannabis and the Industry, do you want to discuss maybe your most preferred chapter, or maybe the chapter specifically on industrial hemp? Maybe talk about some key points that people will receive in that book.
Yeah, actually, I think that is a good thing to talk about because the Newbies Guide anticipates that as cannabis becomes more accepted and common, that people are going to need clear, basic information and guidance, and also people who have got experience. I'm a big picture person. A lot of people, they get lost in the little details, and so this is a book that will get you back into the big picture to understand how these things all tie together, and give people a better, even with a lot of experience and knowledge. First off, it's going to have stuff you haven't heard of before, but second off, it'll probably help people, or at least it's our intention, that it will help people get a sense of how to advance what they're doing already, if they are involved in it, and how to get involved with either the use of cannabis or the industry. We have a whole chapter on hemp, of course, and the real point of it is that we talk about the things that people, the sexy stuff, as it were, earlier on in the book. The idea of getting high, the idea of having a little marijuana store, the idea of saving someone's life, with marijuana. But ultimately, we're building towards the hemp chapter because, to me, that is really the main key. With hemp, we can heal the entire planet. With marijuana, we can heal a person. But with hemp, we've got the entire planet. And so this is telling people not only about the diversity of hemp and how it's got all these different uses and the environmental importance and the economic importance, but also about how to avoid making the basic mistakes that people get in, who get in the hemp industries, and where we see the opportunities being. For example, right now, if you grow a lot of hemp, right now, if you could, you would still have to find a way of getting it to market. And so this is why, in order to get to that point, we need to have people developing the technology to move it forward. And this is hugely exciting. We've got people who are not only working with cannabis for the traditional things like food, clothing, shelter, plastic, and things like that, but we've got people who are doing things like making computer, the 3D printer technology and things like that. And using it for fuel and using it for bioremediation of the planet, either getting rid of using hemp instead of pesticides to control weeds and pests, or using it to draw heavy metals out of the soil. And then we explain that a whole aspect that, that if you're drawing heavy metals out of the soil into your hemp, that means your hemp is contaminated. So that means you can only do certain things with it. And also to dispel certain kinds of what I think are the way I help to propagate. Because like in Hemp Lifeline to the Future and Hemp for Health, I talked about using industrial hemp for the cannabinoids other than THC. But now you have to realize that if you're going to make that into, say, making CBD products out of it, if you're using industrial hemp and it's being grown on soil that's contaminated, then that's going to get into your CBD product. And so, not that you can't use industrial hemp to do it, but you just have to be organic industrial hemp. It couldn't be something that's been used to take mercury out of the soil, for example, and then make a CBD extract out of it. So those kind of things where there's just one more step of thought that really needs to be taken into things to give people that extra idea of where they should go or what they need to watch out for. And of course, the most important thing is you have to apply business sense, and that's where Larry Serban is such a great example, and a number of other people as well. David Bronner, another example. And the like the hemp food products and stuff like that. There's certain areas where you've got an opportunity to make a value-added product and gain a lot of economic gains. There's a lot of areas where you can lose a lot of money. And so this book will try to help people find something that's good for the environment, but also is not going to make them go bankrupt trying to do something good. I don't see that as being a great value to convince people to lose money. And so, I feel kind of bad about all the people who've lost years with hemp. And so this is an opportunity for me to give people those warnings about what to watch out for.
Right on. And it's not just about hemp. It's like you're saying, it's really the whole environment around hemp. And obviously, we have to be conscious corporations that are, like possibly Monsanto coming in and doing genetically modified hemp. Well, it's hemp, but if it's GMO, we got to think bigger picture, which is what your book helps is really think long-term, bigger picture, how we can integrate hemp in the most efficient way that is for the benefit of the whole, not just the individual.
Yeah, absolutely,
so
Tyler. And moreover than that is the idea that I'm a believer in you take advantage of adversity. Things that don't look like they're going to help you can actually be beneficial to you. And I could give you a lot of examples, but I'll just give you the one that right now is that the federal prohibition on cannabis actually gives us the advantage that Monsanto and these big corporations are not going to get involved as long as the federal government might take all their property. And so right now is the opportunity for people who are not those kind of big corporations for us to get control of this industry before it can be taken over by these big powerhouses like that, because they're afraid of the federal government in ways that an individual can show a lot more courage, or a small business, or something within a state, for example. Monsanto is interstate, but it's also international, so they have to deal, if they do something, they have to figure out what's the ramifications on the federal level, what's the ramifications on the international level, whereas if you start a business within the state of, say, Colorado or California, or any state that has a hemp law on the books, as it were, Kentucky, then, as a small business, you don't have to worry about interstate issues. You don't have to worry about international issues. So you are actually in a position to take advantage of what is really an adversity, the marijuana prohibition at the federal level. And so, so a lot of people say, well, we should just have this big national change of the law. And I agree. But at the same time, since we don't have that, let's take advantage of what that gives us. And that gives us the leverage to keep Monsanto out.
Exactly. That's a great insight for the newbies that are just getting into the cannabis world. We've just got about 8 minutes left. I could talk to you for hours. I really appreciate your time, and I have a couple more questions. So what are a few essential principles that you live by, not just in your life, but as it relates to going into court cases, as it relates to business with hemp? What are some of the principles of success that you live by?
One of the things is it really comes down to the same thing to me, which is using good judgment. You have to see your opportunities to take advantage of them, but you have to also be ready to make your move when the time opens up. Like, for example, for me, when I went to when I decided to get involved in the cannabis reform movement, there was really nobody with a plan out there. So I was able to write the plan, the Business Alliance for Commerce and Hemp, restore industrial hemp, allow medical marijuana with the doctor's oversight, re-legalize marijuana for adult use, including personal cultivation and commercial sales. And I put together a package of how to accomplish that, and there was nobody else out there with a proposal. And so you see what's happened in the past 28 years. It all reflects my ideas of how to move forward. I was expecting my plan to be replaced by another plan at some point, but right now it still goes forward. Likewise, when I walked into the museum in Holland and I looked around and I said to the people there, I said, if this was my museum, here's what I would do. And I took out a piece of paper and started drawing stuff, and they said, well, why don't we come back and do that? And so that's how I got into that. When it came to the medical marijuana issue, Proposition 215 in California, where the big schism going on out here. A lot of people don't remember this, but Jack Hare was the industrial hemp, legal marijuana, we want it all or we don't want anything. And then Dennis Peron was, medical marijuana, screw the other stuff. And so most of us were kind of, we wanted it all, we wanted both, But I saw there was an opportunity to make progress within medical marijuana. And so my wife and I, because we were connected to everybody else, Mickey Norris and I became the grassroots coordinator. And we brought together all these groups around the state to make that happen. Likewise, when people after we changed the law here in California, we had people going to prison, and there was no money to defend them. And so there was defense attorneys, and so at that point, I had worked with a lot of those guys, and so they said we needed somebody to come to court who has a background to go ahead and tell the truth to try to set people free, because I always have to tell the truth. And so I saw that opportunity, and I took that. And right now I'm doing a lot of teaching with groups all around the world and so forth. So, I think the main thing is to look for opportunities and pick the ones you want, but make sure you don't hesitate. Make sure you make your move when it's the right time. Another thing is to let it go if it doesn't really matter. But in this movement, there's a lot of I don't know if you can say the expression, but urination contests, so to speak, about who did what when. So I would rather keep the ball moving forward than fight about things like that. And so, if somebody else gets the credit for my work, I just say, oh, well, the work was done. Things are moving forward. That's what I wanted to. I'm not going to, haggle about that. The other thing is to make sure you stand up when you need to. I've had moments like when the DARE program, we got the DARE program thrown out of Oakland, and it led to a chain reaction where it led to the collapse of the DARE program. And the way that happened was that we went to a meeting, and they were trying to get more money for DARE, and a group of us just said, no, we don't want DARE getting more money. In fact, if they can't afford to keep DARE going, this is the perfect time to end it because it's destructive. And so we got Oakland to drop that. But if we hadn't been there to stand up, it wouldn't have happened. And the other thing is, like I said, let somebody else get the credit. It's just don't credit, in 50 years or 100 years or 500 years from now, nobody's even going to remember us, any of us, maybe Jack Harrell will still be remembered, but I think most of us are going to be completely And so it's really important that what world we give to our next generations is much more important than us getting the credit for what we do. And so, like I say, we're not even going to get into a huge amount of the stuff I've done, but it's just, it's not about getting credit. It's about changing the world and saving the world, I think.
Hey, man, I'm so glad to hear you say that. And like I said, you are a dear teacher of mine, somebody I've modeled after for the last 14 years, 12 years, and that's a huge insight for me, and I really appreciate that. So with just 3, if you could describe the next 5 years as far as your highest vision for the cannabis and hemp industry, I'd love to hear it.
I think that the next 5 years, as far as hemp is concerned, is we need to make the transition from just looking at it as a business crop to looking at it as a horticultural bioresource for the restoration of the planet, meaning that we need to be, we've got desertification going on around this country, around the world. That needs to be dealt with. Hemp is a crop that can help us to do that. We've got to stop poisoning the environment so that we can use hemp to do that. We've got areas that have been deforested that need to be covered up to save that soil. We should be using hemp to do that. We've got wetlands that we need to preserve, and keeping hemp in there shades the soil and keeps the moisture in the ground. We've got so many things. I think that this is the time for us not only to take advantage of the financial and industrial benefits of hemp, but also to just look at it. What has it done to this planet for us to have taken the world's most valuable plant and made it illegal and sought to destroy it? And what are we going to do to put the planet back on balance? Almost the vast majority of the problems we have today have been caused in the past 150 years since the Industrial Revolution. And so, this is really what we need to do is how do we maintain our quality of life and standard of living that we have today, but do it in a way that will keep the world alive as it has been in the past. And hemp is totally the answer to that. I think people need to look at that, but they also need to look at how do we financially succeed. And so there's a combination of those two things. We have to resolve that little conflict. It's doing good and making money while doing good.
Amen. Making a difference and a dollar. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. Get your copy of Newbies Guide to Cannabis and the Industry with Chris Conrad. If you haven't checked us out at HempAware.com/radio. If you have iTunes, go to the iTunes podcast library. You can check out all the past archived hemp episodes. Share them with your friends. Take this episode and put it on your Facebook, put it on your website. do whatever you can do. Get a copy of Newbies Guide to Cannabis and the Industry with Chris Conrad. Chris, where can people buy your book when it comes out?
Well, it's going to be all over the place, Amazon.com. We're hoping it'll be actually in Costco and Walmart is what we're working on. But, if people don't have a good bookstore to go to, go online. It's still being printed right now, so we're talking about late November, December before it's going to be available.
All right. Well, that'll be one of the best Christmas gifts I could ever receive. Thank you so much for being on today's show. I hope to have you on a future hemp episode.
My pleasure. And, I would say to your listeners, Tyler is a good example. Follow your passion and do something to educate the world. You can't go wrong with that.
Amen. Have a blessed day. Thanks so much, Chris.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.